So let's continue this conversation about youth when it comes to the issue of homelessness. With us here at the table, Allison Brown, Covenant House Youth, and Kendon Elliott, Community Outreach Program Director, Youth in Need, Sterling Waldman, Missouri GSA Network. We started talking about this with the last conversation. Did that track with what you're thinking when you think of how does a young person find themselves in this situation?
Well, in my experience, a lot of my friends who have experienced homelessness have been kicked out of their homes because they identify as LGBT. And actually, according to a 2012 report called Serving Our Youth, there's about 40% of youth who are homeless identify as LGBT, which is a very high percentage because in the general population, it's about 7%.
Does that sound familiar? Does that sound accurate to what your knowledge and the work that you do has been?
Absolutely. We serve a large number of LGBT youth within our programs, and they experience homelessness at definitely a higher rate than the general youth population.
And then once they're in that situation, does that continue to play a role in how they get services and how they move forward or how they try to move out of that situation?
I absolutely think it does. I think that we're doing a much better job in this region of serving LGBT youth, I think effectively and in a culturally competent way. I think that previously services weren't very welcoming. And I can say Youth in Need and our partner agencies such as Covenant House have really done a great job of doing more training with the staff and really working together to try to make sure that our services are really welcoming and accepting of all youth.
A whole other side of the issue people may not even think about.
I just wanted to mention that I found myself homeless. I'm currently staying at Covenant House and they have a really good program, but I found myself homeless on and off throughout the past 3 or 4 years because of my mental health situation. I feel like it kind of compromised decisions I would have made because of what I'm dealing with. So I feel like everybody has a different situation that leads up to them being homeless when they're a youth, but it just varies from person to person.
Can I ask how old you were when you first found yourself in that situation?
I was about 18.
And what did you do? Where did you go?
I was in Kansas City and I went to, it was a church-led family homeless shelter, and my roommates were like grown women with children, and it was chaotic and hectic, but it was a good place.
Does age become a factor when it comes to finding services, the people you're next to, the people you're rubbing shoulders with?
Age is a huge factor, I believe, when it comes to youth and homelessness. When it comes to being treated as a youth, there's a small window of time. I know Covenant House, I think, is from 16 to 21. I currently am 21, so in about 6 months, I'm gonna age out. And from what I've heard and from what I've seen, it's a different set of challenges being an official adult and living in the homeless world and seeking help, because people stop being so gentle and nurturing with you, and it's kind of like, okay, you're here now, so what do we need to do? And it's, from what I've heard, it's a bit rougher. But also I was gonna mention that it depends on where you go and where you stay at, because I've been at domestic abuse shelters where my roommates are like, you know, grown women and they've got toddlers in the room, and that can be stressful on everyone, to being at Covenant House where everyone's about my age.
Sounds like a scary situation.
Mm-hmm. We definitely see a large number of our young people, I'll say, especially our young boys, who may, because of a lack of capacity in youth shelters, may find themselves in some of the adult programming. Mm-hmm. And not that those programs aren't safe or effective for those adults, but they don't feel safe there. You know, with being a 17-year-old youth, being with 40 and 50-year-old men who maybe have chronic mental illness or things like that, you know, they would rather sleep on the street or in a vacant building than be in that situation. So they won't accept those services sometimes.
You're nodding your head, Allison.
Yeah, I agree.
Are you scared to turn 21?
It's something definitely on my mind. Like I said, Covenant House has a great program. I'm working with the case manager right now, and so we're really working hard on having a solid plan for when I do turn 22. So, I mean, if I wasn't working so hard on it, on my backup plan, I would be very worried.
Sterling, what else does it mean? How else is it different to be facing this issue as a young person versus an adult?
Well, there's a lot of different issues that can come up, especially with LGBT youth and homelessness, because of transgender students or transgender young people in shelters. Some shelters either turn away LGBT young people. Gratefully, there's places that don't and will take them in and house them appropriately. So making sure that trans boys are housed with boys and trans girls are housed with girls, and then they're getting services that align with their gender identity if they identify as transgender is very important, and not unlike things that happen in schools where there's different challenges that they face. So a trans boy using the boys' bathroom at school might face the same issues when staying with other boys who aren't trans, threats and things like that. So things like that can come up.
Did that sound familiar, what they were describing with the loop, and you're hanging out and you're blending in? Did you hear those stories? Have you experienced that yourself? And then at the end of the day, nowhere to go.
Absolutely. You know, one thing that we see frequently is our young people too want to avoid, I think, police, avoid social services and things like that. So they also want to fit in, you know, and so they're trying to avoid calling attention to themselves and getting in a situation where they're taken away somewhere. They have their fears, you know. They've already maybe been through a lot of trauma or abuse or things like that at home, and then to have to worry about what they're going to deal with on the street is really difficult.
I think in my experience, I live in the county, so blending in is I think easier because people might couch surf like people talked about earlier, and it's not at all unheard of for me to house people at my house over entire weekends for a week or two while they find somewhere a little bit more permanent to stay or stay with another friend.